This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
Bring National Post beyond the headlines. Shop official merch including hoodies, hats, mugs, tote bags, and more. Designed for readers who like their journalism bold. Visit postmedia.store today. Thousands of women spend millions of dollars in Canada every year to freeze their eggs with the hope of giving them flexibility on when to have children. But an investigation from the Investigative Journalism Bureau and Postmedia have found that the industry is full of misleading marketing and emotional manipulation. I'm Dave Breckenridge, and this is 10-3. Wendy-Ann Clarke and Culbert join me to discuss what sparked this investigation, what messaging women are getting from clinics in the industry, and how much money is involved. Don't forget you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. I'd love it if you could leave us a rating, a review, and tell your friends about the show. So Lori and Wendy-Ann, you recently published the first part in a series looking at Canada's fertility industry. And there's a lot of ground to cover, even in the first part. And I guess for basics, for starters, Wendy-Ann, when did egg freezing get developed as a technique, and what was its initial purpose? And I guess when did it become allowed for more personal and family planning purposes?
Yeah, for sure. So egg freezing was developed in the mid 1980s or so. The first reported human birth from a frozen egg, I believe, was 1986. So initially, it was created to help women who were undergoing medical treatment that could impact their fertility. So we're talking about things like cancer treatments. But it became more practical later on through the development of a rapid freezing technology called vitrification, which minimized damage to the eggs. So it became available for personal family planning purposes in Canada in 2012 after it was deemed no longer experimental. So you'll hear the terms elective egg freezing or social egg freezing to refer to it. And actually, one of the experts that we spoke to very early on in this investigation made a really interesting point. While egg freezing started as a medical technology, it's actually shifted into a consumer industry very intentionally. She pointed to companies like one that grew out of a Harvard Business School project that built a business model around marketing egg freezing directly to women through advertising campaigns, egg freezing parties, which we actually attended one of those as part of this investigation, and just sort of tapping into concerns around the biological clock. So, elective egg freezing, as we know it, started as a business idea. And we know this desire to have children is amongst the most fundamental parts of the human story. But today, that desire is a business, and hope has become an industry. And people deserve to know exactly what they're buying if they're investing in that. So that's sort of how this project, Fertility Inc., and why we think it's so important.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you talk about it being a business. Lori, how much has the industry grown, and how big is the industry in Canada today?
So the overall fertility industry in Canada is booming. It's now estimated to be worth $1 billion. Egg freezing in Canada more than doubled between 2020 and 2024. We know from statistics that women spent $120 million on egg freezing treatment in this country between 2013 and 2023. And that was on more than 6,000 egg freezing cycles. And the number of clinics that perform egg freezing also appears to be growing. There's no public list of clinics that offer egg freezing. We couldn't find, a list compiled by governments, but the IJB was able to count a minimum of 42 separate clinics in Canada, with a total of 110 storefront locations.
When it comes to the number of babies born via in vitro fertilization, what portion of Canadian babies does this represent, especially as the industry has gotten so big?
Yeah. So um, In vitro fertilization is actually the second part of egg freezing. So you can have most of the babies that are born through in vitro fertilization are actually born from fresh eggs.
Okay.
So when we talk about egg freezing from frozen eggs, so that's sort of like the first part of what could be an in vitro fertilization journey, if that makes sense. So what we know from Stats Canada is about 4.1 million babies were born in Canada between 2013 and 2023. And according to data that we have from the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, which is essentially a nonprofit representing reproductive specialists and who publish this data annually, we know that about 70 babies were born from frozen eggs in that time frame. So of the 4.1 million babies born in Canada during that decade, 70 babies were born from frozen eggs. And as Lori mentioned, we know that Canadian women have spent or invested up to $120 million in egg freezing. Um, and we also know from CFAS data that only about 25% of embryos created from frozen eggs and transferred into women's wombs actually resulted in a live birth within that time frame. And then, furthermore, really interesting is that an estimated 96% of eggs frozen in that time frame have not been used. So the data is pretty consistent that the women that are investing in this technology aren't really coming back to use their frozen eggs.
So we have a procedure that is part of a growing industry, and as you just said, Wendy-Ann, that not a lot of women are coming back to use these frozen eggs. How much money are they spending to freeze their eggs, Lori?
So there are no national regulations governing what fertility clinics can charge because they're mostly private businesses. Of the 42 clinics that the our investigation was able to identify that market egg freezing, we found one third had no pricing available on their websites. Among the clinics that do publish prices, we found the rates ranged from $6,500 to up to $13,000 for one cycle of egg freezing. Additional mandatory fees include medication costs ranging from $3,000 to $9,000 per cycle, while the annual bill to store frozen eggs can fluctuate from $300 a year to $1,000 a year because every clinic charges women to an annual fee to keep these eggs frozen. I mean, some clinics even link to money lenders on their websites. I mean, there's an acknowledgement that this is really expensive. We spoke with multiple women who took increasingly drastic steps to afford the procedure. And some of them did this because they believed that egg freezing was a form of insurance for having children later in life. I mean, some of the women talked about bootlegging alcohol or borrowing money from relatives or withdrawing money from RRSPs or traveling internationally where the procedure is cheaper. Um, the other thing to keep in mind about the costs that we found is that, at least on the website, the clinics don't make it super clear to women that after they've spent, say, up to $20,000 for one round of egg freezing, that if they want to use one of those frozen eggs to create a baby down the road, that the costs just keep mounting after that. It can cost up to $10,000 to thaw your eggs. And in vitro fertilization can cost up to $20,000 per round. It's a big ticket
Hmm.
item.
That is huge, a huge cost. Your investigation in the first part anyway looked at how the service is marketed to women. I'm curious, Wendy-Ann, what sparked this investigation?
No, that's a good question. So it kind of started with a personal story, really, Dave. For most of my adult life, I never heard the proverbial ticking biological clock. I always believed that if having children was meant to be a part of my story, then it would be. And if not, I trusted there was purpose in that too. But sometime during the pandemic, I started hearing more and more about egg freezing. It would be an ad here, a social media post there, another celebrity talking about how she took control of her future through egg freezing. And the message was just everywhere. And even coming from the fertility clinics themselves, that science had given women more time, that finally women had a snooze button for their fertility. But it didn't really come close in on me until it entered into my friend group. Somebody very close to me started being influenced by the messaging and visited a fertility clinic. And suddenly, for me, something that I'd never worried about began to feel like something I was being irresponsible for ignoring. So I started asking questions like, how much does this cost? What are the chances that these frozen eggs become a baby? What happens after thousands of women put their hopes and resources in this technology? And the answers were much harder to find than I expected. And when I did find them, they challenged almost everything that I thought I understood about egg freezing. So the marketing, as we found, you'll see in this investigation, is often wrapped in words like freedom and empowerment and choice. But the reality, as we've been discussing, is much more complicating. Success is not guaranteed. Costs can climb into tens and thousands of dollars. And many women are making this deeply personal decision in an industry in Canada where experts are warned that transparency and oversight has not kept pace with the technology. So I made my decision about egg freezing pretty quickly, but I couldn't stop thinking about the women that would come after me, and that kind of question and curiosity is what eventually became Fertility Inc.
Hmm. And you mentioned some things that you discovered. Were there any other main findings through this investigation that kind of stood out for you?
Yeah. So we it felt like Pandora's box. We started looking at marketing, and as we went through it, we just saw more and more. So the investigation took about 8 months, and part of that involved a careful review of the marketing of these clinics. So what are these clinics saying about egg freezing? So we analyzed the websites and the social media accounts of the 42 clinics representing about 110 locations across the nation, and found not in all clinics, but the large majority of clinics, we found widespread concerns raised by experts about misleading advertising, emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and a lack of transparency around success rates. In many cases, clinics appeared to overstate what egg freezing can realistically offer, suggesting a level of certainty or control over future fertility that the data just doesn't support.
Lori, when we talk about these clinics, who owns and operates these? Are they public hospitals? Are they private clinics? What's the mix here in terms of who's taking on these women as patients and offering these messaging around giving people freedom or certainty around when they can and want to have kids?
So, what our investigation found is that of the 42 clinics that we could identify, only three are affiliated with public hospitals, such as McGill University Health Center in Montreal and Mount Sinai in Toronto. And the messaging from public clinics seemed far more reliable based on what we could find. Um, what we discovered is that about 19 of the clinics that we identified are physician owned. So, in other words, they're owned by the obstetricians and gynecologists who perform the fertility services. And at least 17 others have ties to private equity firms through ownership or investment. And we're really seeing a big growth of private equity getting involved in the fertility business, which is a signal of, the money making opportunities in this industry right now. I will also flag for you that most of the 42 clinics are in the four largest provinces: Ontario, Quebec, BC, and Alberta, with few or none in the other provinces, which really does create a disparity for Canadian women.
Wendy-Ann, in your piece, you talk about women being offered misleading claims about um, taking this choice or taking this path in their life. What kind of claims are we talking about here?
Yeah, so we found more than 100 statements that appear to be misleading. So I'll just read you a couple of them here. So, what if you could decide when to have a baby without worrying about your biological clock? Sound too good to be true? Well, not anymore. That came from the Instagram account of a Montreal clinic. Um, and, when we went back to the clinic and asked about the marketing, they actually agreed that it wasn't 100% accurate, but said that, all the clinics are marketing in this way. Um, and that was really, their defense of it. Another claim that we flagged here was you can choose to travel the world and still choose when the time is right to start a family. Take control of your reproductive future through egg freezing. We saw that repeatedly. And words like flexibility and phrases like peace of mind, freezing your eggs will give you peace of mind, and even found a reference to a guaranteed baby program. A lot of emotional marketing, like remove the stress that can rush you into the wrong relationship, or that egg freezing allows women to enjoy, like I said, flexibility, peace of mind, that kind of thing. And experts that we spoke to say that while it's a great option for some women, this widespread marketing of this technology as a silver bullet solution to complex challenges around fertility, relationships, careers, family planning is really far fetched, especially considering that it can run up to $20,000 for a single cycle, and amounts might not be made explicitly clear at the outset.
We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao. A gift from Italy to your home. San Pellegrino Ciao is a flavored sparkling water made with real fruit juice, finished with a pinch of Sicilian salt for a perfectly balanced taste. So which flavor will you choose? Peach, lime, blood orange, cherry, or maybe the all-new limoncello? Crafted in Italy with 0 grams of added sugar. San Pellegrino Ciao. Buy it now.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
What do women feel or say about some of the things they're told about the process and the pressure that they may have felt to make a decision like this?
So we spoke to 30 women who either froze their eggs or investigated the idea of freezing their eggs. And I just want to say, Dave, we're not arguing in this story or series of stories that um, egg freezing is wrong and that women shouldn't have access to it at all, because there's a wide range of opinions from these women that we spoke with. Some don't regret doing it. I think what Wendy-Ann and I are arguing is just that women deserve to have all the information up front so they can make an informed decision. So some of the women said they felt the pressure to freeze their eggs due to marketing, especially with this message of you must do this before the age of 35 to lock in your future fertility. And again, like Wendy-Ann said, some of the women felt that as they were pursuing careers or trying to pay off debt or save money, or maybe were still looking for a partner, that this would be a simple solution to put off motherhood. I spoke with one woman from Vancouver. Her name is Megan Robinson, who she's among the women that does not regret freezing her eggs. She did that earlier this year, but she was surprised by several things as she went through the process. She was surprised by how hard it was to mix up this medication at home, and how painful it was to inject the needles twice a day for 2 weeks. She found the whole procedure left her often tired and sore. At the end of her experience, she was only able to freeze 4 eggs, which is a relatively low number, giving her really only about a 25% chance of turning any of those eggs into a baby. And she called the experience a roller coaster of emotions. And, she said the recovery after the procedure took longer than she anticipated. But at the end of the day, she believes that it's given her a chance at motherhood when she might want to pursue that chance. Um, and we heard women talk about that.
Wendy-Ann, for you, what kind of stories had you heard? I know you mentioned kind of a personal connection to this. There were friends of yours. What were you hearing from some of the people that you either spoke with for this piece or that you've spoken with in your day to day?
Yeah, it's funny. I was at dinner with a friend last night who I didn't even know this, but she said that we were talking about the investigation, and she said she'd gone to a Toronto clinic and had a consultation a couple years ago, and said she left feeling really really anxious. She just came in for just to get some the lay of the land and some more information about her fertility, and left in a bit of a panic. And that we did hear that that people weighing this felt more anxious after coming out of these sessions. There's one woman that I'm thinking of who froze her eggs in Montreal in 2022, I believe, at age 36, and said very poignantly that in conversations with her doctor, she couldn't always tell if she was speaking to the doctor or the business person. So, as one of our experts put it, you kind of have a situation where the patients kind of become customers, and there's a bit of a conflict of interest that some of our women that we spoke to said that they felt in their clinical conversations around egg freezing. We also spoke to women, as Lori mentioned, that absolutely do not regret their decision to freeze their eggs, but just wish that they had more information. One Toronto woman I spoke to mentioned that um, she was never told, as a 37-year-old going in to freeze her eggs, that she might have to do multiple rounds. And multiple rounds, many women have to do multiple rounds, especially as they get older, to get the amount of eggs that will give them a viable shot at a pregnancy. And she said after her first round of retrieval, they said she needed to do another round to get more eggs. And she had depleted her entire savings up to $20,000. And she was like, I can't afford to do another round, and it was quite devastated. So just not getting enough information. For the most part, we're hearing that women aren't regretting it, but are very concerned about the way that it's marketed, and some of them saying that they would have invested their money differently in fertility if they had all the information available to them, which was not.
Mm-hmm. Lori, you mentioned earlier about kind of a low number of people that are coming back and going through with in vitro after they've had their eggs frozen. Why is there such a low uptake? Is it the process? Is it the cost involved in the fertility treatments after the fact? What goes on with this low uptake there? What's behind that?
So Dave, we simply cannot answer your question because we don't know for sure why there's been such a low uptake. I mean, there are lots of possibilities, which, women might have frozen their eggs and then gone on to have a baby naturally. They might have frozen their eggs and then decided that they don't want to have children. They might have frozen their eggs and just still haven't come back to use them yet. It's kind of impossible to know, but this is what we do know. We know that Canadians froze more than 65,000 eggs between 2013 and 2023. And over that decade, 96% haven't been used. And Canada is not an outlier here. I mean, we found a 2025 study from the University of California, Los Angeles, that found just 5.7% of American patients came back to use the eggs that they froze within 5 to 7 years of freezing them, which, you think might be the ballpark of when women might come back and try to use them again.
What rules are in place regarding these clinics, and what happens if they break the rules, especially around how they advertise to potential clients?
So That's the thing. There aren't a lot of rules to break. So our federal fertility law around assisted reproduction is called the Assisted Human Reproduction Act, which was passed in 2004. And it focuses very narrowly on things like the safety of donor sperm and eggs and prohibited practices like paying for surrogacy. But it's not a comprehensive clinic oversight system. So, fertility clinics in this country sit in like a messy jurisdictional gap where the federal government regulates some safety and ethical issues, the provinces regulate healthcare delivery, but neither level of government has fully taken ownership of the fertility industry as a consumer facing medical marketplace. So, it's literally largely an orphan, as one expert put it, in the healthcare system. And that has left a lot of the oversight to physicians, the professional colleges, and clinics themselves. So we know when it comes to marketing, most of the regulatory colleges across the country prohibit false and misleading advertising. But because the colleges are a complaints based system, it's not enough to really regulate and control the marketing that's going out there. So we know that in the UK, the regulators actively monitor clinic advertising using AI to scan thousands of ads and issue enforcement notices challenging misleading claims. And according to 2025 reports, that approach has reduced noncompliance significantly. So there's precedent in other jurisdictions that we can do this, but in Canada there seems to be a bit of a lack of will to take responsibility for it. So the experts that we spoke to say that Canada desperately needs a parliamentary review of assisted reproduction, and that would include uniform standards across provinces, long-term tracking of outcomes, and stronger consumer protections. And part of that might also include a federal website, like a national website that independently from the fertility industry itself shows individual clinic success rates, cost of fertility procedures, and can regulate the marketing that's coming out from these clinics as well.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the investigation overall, it's obviously a large investigation. There are multiple parts to this series. You can read at nationalpost.com. Part one, as we've discussed, looked at how these practices are marketed to women. What does the rest of the series explore?
So, on one of the days, we examined further the cost issue, which we discussed already in this podcast, but there's other elements. We talk about, how some women are sometimes upsold unproven add-ons that are sometimes marketed as necessary. And these add-ons increase the final bill, but they don't necessarily increase the chances of successfully having a baby. We found of the 27 clinic websites with price lists, nearly all, 93% of them, offered additional options such as the analysis of egg quality using artificial intelligence. And these all cost money. I mean, as one of our expert told us, she said, we see a lot of unnecessary add-ons that aren't really scientifically proven to be effective, but they bring in the money. On another day of our series, we analyzed the backgrounds of the physicians that work in these clinics. We looked at the backgrounds of 260 physicians who are affiliated with clinics that freeze eggs. We found 9 doctors who had current or past restrictions placed on their licenses by provincial regulatory bodies due to previous serious misconduct or allegations of misconduct. 5 of these 9 are or were employed by one clinic in Ontario. 8 of these specialists still work at clinics in Ontario or Quebec, but we were unable to find any mention of their disciplinary issues on the clinic's websites. And these are for infractions such as a physician once at the center of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, or one who had faced 16 counts of professional misconduct in another provinces. At the end of the day, fertility clinics are not required to post information like this on their websites. These types of restrictions are posted online by provincial regulatory bodies that oversee doctors, but the experts we spoke with argue that this is perhaps not the most transparent system for patients.
Yeah, and we also, in our story that was published today, and by today I mean on June 15th, uh, looked at success rates and the lack of transparency of success rates. It's really important for the people that are investing tens and thousands of dollars into these technologies, whether that be egg freezing or IVF, to understand their chances of success at a particular clinic. And as we've discussed, the clinic practices themselves play an important role in the success of the procedures. So, for example, Arthur Leader, who's one of the fertility experts that we spoke to as part of this investigation, through Freedom of Information request, he obtained the anonymized live birth rates of clinics across Ontario. And for women under 35 in 2019, the success rates, meaning the rate of live birth, ranged from less than 10% at the worst performing clinic and more than 60% at the highest performing clinic in the province. And the variation between was all over the map. So if you or someone you know was investing in this technology, wouldn't you want them to have that information? In the UK, they have that information. In the United States, they have that information. In Canada, they don't. And for our final story of this series, as we discussed, we talk about the possible solutions to these challenges. And, I've discussed a parliamentary review, making success rates public. We have the issue of what happens to unused eggs. Like there's no regulation, there's no rules in terms of what happens if people decide that they don't want to use their eggs, or they forget about them. Are they discarded? Can you give them to someone else so they can have a chance to have a child? There's no rules around the whole situation. But what was really interesting for me, and really us, and something that we talked about a lot throughout this investigation, is that in these conversations that we had with these women about their investment in this technology, those that had already invested or were seriously considerate, um, they did not express a desire to delay pregnancy because, for the most part, because of their careers or because they wanted to spend a decade frolicking the world in solo travel. But they instead expressed a longing for a romantic relationship that felt safer and more stable, social systems that structurally and economically made caregiving and motherhood seem more practical. They talked about their financial responsibilities and like their schedules being so intense that they couldn't imagine how they would be able to get out of the rat race to be able to raise their children. So that really, really surprised me. And it felt almost like an oxymoron that these women that were investing often sacrificially into this very groundbreaking, fertility technology, marketed to give them control. But most of them seemed quite traditional in their simple desire to fall in love and build a family and be able to provide for them. And I think in the conversation around solutions, and certainly what came out of the conversations with experts who talked about, making uh, caregiving and motherhood more practical financially and structurally, that it's very important for us to discuss as a society that rather than assuming that women who want to delay pregnancy are doing so because they want to be astronauts or something, but understanding that there's some shifts that have happened over the past few decades in the way that we do family and the way that we do society, that's made this fundamental desire to have children seem unattainable for a lot of people.
I have to say, it is a bit of an eye-opening article. Someone who's not familiar with the practice in the industry, it caught me by surprise. I think it's important work. Wendy-Ann and Lori, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having us, Dave.
Thanks for having us. It's been a pleasure.
10-3 is produced by Sean Knox. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Thanks to my guests, Wendy-Ann Clarke and Lori Culbert. You can read this whole series at nationalpost.com. I'm Dave Breckenridge. Thanks for listening.